Welcome to the screencast for Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas for the EdXL certificate in the Anthology Section C. You will need your anthology or a copy of the poem, pens, highlighters, etc. and access to the internet. When you see this post-it note sign, it means that you will need to do something, so be prepared to make a note or a mind map or annotate, or it might just be a thinking point. By the end of this screencast, hopefully you will feel you have a better understanding of the poem. You will have a variety of strategies that you can use to unlock the meaning of this poem and any other poem. You will hopefully recognise the form, the type of poem, poetic devices, and start to consider the possible effects of these, to be able to discuss the poem with confidence, to recognise that meaning can be ambiguous, and to feel confident with that. I need to let you know now that I will not be going through the poem and telling you what every single word means, because that will result in a C, possibly, or a D grade in the exam. The examiners want to see originality, your own response to the poem. So I will be posing questions and offering you ideas. Firstly, quickly mind map what connotations you have for light and day and dark and night. On your mind map, think about how a poet would use them symbolically. This means to suggest something else. Press pause now to create your mind map. Welcome back. Often light and day are considered to be symbols or metaphors for life, the living, hope, for example. And night and dark are often used symbolically or metaphorically to connote death, ending, finality. Bear these ideas in mind when we come to look at the poem. So, death in the poem. It is inevitable, we all know that. This poem is requiring you to think about what type of person you are. Do you like to keep going no matter what, or do you give up easily? Are you the type of person who wants the absolute best? No matter what the outcome, you will try your hardest. If you are, then Dylan Thomas's poem is for you. It's beautiful, inspirational, and incredibly powerful. Thomas challenges the notion of dying gracefully. He encourages us and his father, to whom he is addressing the poem, to rage against death as strongly as possible. If you need to press pause at any moment to make notes, please do so. The poem itself. Firstly, I would always recommend that you read a poem 2 or 3 times aloud. Poems are meant to be heard. They're meant to be listened to. And in the box here, you will notice there is a web address where you can actually hear the actual poet, Dylan Thomas, with his beautiful Welsh voice, reading the poem. It's a very powerful reading. Press pause now and listen to the reading. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the reading. A little bit of biography before we go into the actual poem itself. Dylan Thomas was born in South Wales in 1914. He was from a well-read family. His father was a professor of English literature, and he would often read to Thomas from a young age, and Thomas could recite lots of Shakespeare from a very young age. Unlike many of his contemporaries, this means poets writing at the same time, people like T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden, who we're going to be looking at also in the anthology. Thomas wasn't concerned with exhibiting themes of social and intellectual issues. His writing was intensely lyrical, so it sounded musical, and lots of highly charged emotion, so strong emotion. It makes him quite similar in tradition to the Romantic writers. Remember that Romantic writers are not necessarily concerned with love. Look at Keats or Byron or Wordsworth. Thomas describes his technique in a letter. I make one image, though make is not the right word. I let perhaps an image be made, emotionally in me, and then apply it to what intellectual and critical forces I possess. Let it breed another. Let that image contradict the first. Make of the third image, bred out of the other 2 together, a 4th contradictory image, and let them all, within my imposed formal limits, conflict. So hopefully you can see there's an awful lot there about his use of imagery, perhaps about the idea of contradictions and conflicts in his poetry. Bear all of this in mind. Press pause, read the rest of the biography notes, and make any notes you feel you need to. So, on to the actual poem. You need the poem in front of you now, as you are going to be annotating. First of all, we need to consider the form of the poem. It's called a villanelle. So you might have heard of sonnets or ballads. This is another type of poetry. Villanelles have 19 lines. They consist of 5 stanzas with 3 lines and a final stanza with 4 lines. I've included the numbers, the line numbers for you here to help you. The rhyme scheme, and I've again included the numbers, the letters in green for you, ABA, ABA, all the way through to the end where we get AB and a repetition of the A. 2 lines, which we call refrains, which I've highlighted in blue for you, are repeated 4 times each, and you'll notice they're alternate. So we get rage, rage against the dying of the light is our A refrain, and our B refrain, our next refrain, do not go gentle into that good night. You'll notice that these 2 refrains meet in the final 2 lines of the poem. When you're reading through the poem, think about the order. We get light, night, light, night, light, night, light. The poem is about death, yet he ends on light. Why might that be? Some questions for you to think of. What is the effect of the repetition and the repeated words in the refrains? Do you think the poem has a sing-song quality to it? Think back to our biographical information. What is the effect of this combined with the harsh consonant sounds? And have you noticed that Thomas often changes the ends of words to make them sound less soft? Do not go gentle into that good night. Wouldn't we normally expect gently? It sounds slightly odd, doesn't it? Slightly jarring. So think about why that might be. Connect it to the theme of the poem, that he's asking us to fight against this thing called death. Stanza 1. We get the extended metaphor in stanza 1 of night equaling death. So night, close of day, dying of the light. The repetition of the night and death metaphor at the end of each line is perhaps suggesting that death is getting closer? Is it something that is inevitable, that it will catch all of us at some time? But is he asking us to fight against that, to not just accept it passively? We get imperative words, imperative commands. Do not, rage, and the modal verb should. These establish the tone of the poem, and the tone is one of frustration, one of anger, and one of passion. Consider the effect of other words such as burn, rave, rage. Think about the sounds of these words and why Dylan would use them. Stanza 2. Again, we get the metaphor continuing throughout. Though wise men at their end know dark is right. Dark again is considering or is reflecting death. And this idea that wise men at the end of their lives, they know that death is coming. They do accept it. They understand it. The syntax in this stanza, however, is slightly confusing, and it might be more helpful for you if you reorder the poem in this way. Line 4, line 5, line 6. Listen to it now. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, do not go gentle into that good night, because their words had forked no lightning. Line 5 can be slightly confusing. Does words mean our actions, that what we have done, what we leave behind? Does forked no lightning mean that we haven't made a big enough impact yet? We haven't left a lightning bolt on the world? So taking all of this in mind, though wise men at their end know dark is right, they do not go gentle into that good night, yet, because they have still more to do. With the imagery in line 5, is Thomas saying to truly live means to live like lightning, passionately, energetically, urgently, rather than quietly, calmly, passively? Stanza 3. Again, the syntax is confused. Thomas needed the form to fit the villanelle form. Quite often, poets would simply change words. Look at Shakespeare, often omitted letters to make it fit the form that they were writing in. To help you understand what's going on here, pick out some of the key words. Good men, rage. Truly good men rage against death. See? The poem's not so difficult. Theme alert here. Transience. How fleeting life is. We don't have time to do everything. Frail deeds might have been able to dance had the good men had more time. Thomas uses lots of sea imagery here of waves. Perhaps the waves are rolling onto the shore, but they could have danced beforehand. Think of the connotations of the green bay. Green we often connote with life, vitality and living. There's an ambiguity here as well. Their deeds frail? Is this because they are dying or because their deeds weren't strong enough? Are their deeds weakened by age? This is where you can see there are lots of different interpretations, and it's up to you to decide which you feel strongly. Stanza 4. Wise men, wild. Interesting ideas here. Who were the wild men who caught and sang? What did they catch and sing? Life? Did these people who really saw life realize that it doesn't last forever? Did they grieve that life would not last and learn too late they grieve? We get imagery here of the sun in flight. Is this symbolic of our lives and our lifespan? So the sun life is like our flight, in flight is like our lives. The sun inevitably sets, therefore our lives inevitably set through death. Stanza 5. We get the pun here of grave men. Obviously grave means where you're buried, but also grave can mean serious. Even though they are blind, they still see metaphorically more clearly than they ever did before. Think about the idea of blinding light. So at their death, at that near stage to death, they suddenly see things with a clarity they hadn't before. And what is it that they see? That they still have the capacity, the ability, the power to fight and take control. They know that they can't overcome death, but they can keep fighting until the very end. They want to die like meteors blazing across the sky. Stanza 6. What do you think he means by the sad height here? Is he talking about the distance between the father and son in terms of life? One is near death. Is he perhaps talking about the valley of death, this traditional Christian image? Is it perhaps the deathbed? We get more commands from the sun again. We get this idea of urgency, curse, bless. It doesn't matter what you say. Do something in these final moments. And then the villanelle form brings the repeated lines together in the final stanza. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. His final words to his father. Keep fighting until the very, very end. Now I would like you to make a scatty table, looking at setting, character, action, style ideas. Rather than simply copying down what I've said, I want you to actively engage with the poem and come up with your own ideas and interpretations. This is where A stars come from. Press pause, read through my notes here, answer any questions that you think you can. If there are any that you're not sure of, you can always ask your teacher in class. I now want you to make a themes table. Again, I want you to be thinking on your own independently about the poem and not just relying on ideas that I pose to you here. Press pause and read through the screen. Welcome back. Hopefully you now feel you have a better understanding of the poem. You should feel that you've used a variety of strategies. For example, we've looked at stanza by stanza, we've spotted devices, we've used scatty, and we've looked at themes. Hopefully you feel you can recognise the form of the poem, you can discuss it with a little bit more confidence, and you can recognise that ambiguity is fine as long as you can justify your ideas. If you feel yes to even some of these, then you have been successful in following this screencast. Very best of luck in your examination.